Dave, round two. Here we are. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks.
So, we're going to be getting into the second phase of where you took the business and why you are where you are. So, you are sitting in one of your brand new places, which is some of the benefits of the end of this journey, right?
For sure.
So I'm excited. We just to kind of recap, we had left it off after you kind of talking about the growth of the business, you taking it over, getting to 2015. And why don't you just kind of recap for the listeners, why is 2015 a spot in your mind where things changed?
Yeah, so 2015 was really when my daughter came in, Paige, who's still working for the PE group and us. She came in and I recognized, she came in January, and I recognized kind of early on that the system with which I was running, which was me, was not conducive to anybody else really getting into the business and helping. She's really smart, talented, went to go work in Seattle for a couple of years, and I needed her back. I thought I needed her back. I was right. Just as something to, somebody, again, my dad did it, and I could trust her to be there and help straighten some things out. My national sales manager was looking at retiring, and she was in her, later 60s. So I wanted to have somebody that would be not leaving the company, right?
And that was the sales manager
employee.
that you had said was kind of she was a 10-year, lot of wisdom, and she was the one that kind of brought some of the ideas to you and everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So she'd been with us, for 10, 11 years no, wait, 20 years at that point. Wow. So, so she was the one, and I knew I needed to replace her, and I didn't want her knowledge to go to somebody else that could leave me. That was, my biggest fear as a business owner. You bring somebody in, they learn all this, and they take it somewhere else. So,
how big was the business in 2015?
How big was it?
Yeah. How many employees?
Yeah, probably 15 to 17 employees, and we were probably doing 7.5 million,
okay,
something like that.
Nice.
And we hovered around 7.5 million for a long time. And I was mentioning earlier, I had a chance to look up some of the numbers to try to look at like EBITDA perspective and trying to figure out how we were making money. And I paid myself well, like most small business guys do. And we gobble up, seller discretionary income, right? Dump some of that back in and do these things. So I kind of looked and, yeah, it's the perks. And I kind of went back and looked, and, we were probably, our EBITDA, for lack of better terms, was probably 400 or 500 grand. A lot was depreciation, interest and amortization, because I had bought Moss Epoxies a couple of years before. We were, again, I think we talked about this. I dumped a lot of money back in to try to get the growth, and we were just a little bit stagnant. We were trying to grow. We couldn't. Paige came on, and then I looked at how many people were coming through my office on a day. Right? This is 2015. I'm like, well, this is nuts. This doesn't work, right? It doesn't work that everybody in the company is reporting to me. And I think I mentioned a friend of mine in business had said they were doing traction. I looked into it and said, well, we should try this. So I contacted Chris Naylor, and this is now the summer of 2015. And I got my leadership team, what I thought was my leadership team, which is the same people that got me through the fire. And then you just would add Paige to that, right? Mm-hmm. And the debate was, well, does she belong or doesn't she belong? And Chris Naylor said, hey, she belongs. If she's family, she's going to run this thing. You need to get her in, because sometimes traction is run so pure. EOS is run so pure that like she doesn't belong because she's not a decision maker. But Chris Naylor kind of said, no, we're bringing her in. She needs to learn this if that's what you want. So
did you know, which is super helpful, and we're going to get into the EOS and kind of where this took you, but did you know what EBITDA was at this point? And then I kind of know the answer. And so I'm kind of teeing you up. And I'm because I know we're going to get to that, right? As you became more educated. But like, so at this point, you're just kind of like, what was your mindset, Dave? Like, and that's kind of what I was getting at. Is like, when you're thinking about the business, like what were you solving for, and what was your mindset?
My mindset was I was overwhelmed. Truly. And I thought I was doing a lot of things really well, and I was managing it. I think a lot of us probably that come onto your podcast are ADD, high energy people, and I could just handle it. I mean, that's what I believe, right? I can handle all of these things and just manage it all. And that's, I guess what I've learned now is that's a fantastic trait, right? I mean, it's unbelievable that we can do that and get to a certain point. And when I was there, I just saw the mess that I had created to not allow even somebody that I trusted, like my daughter, to walk into this company and have any sort of control over anything or autonomy. It just wasn't there. And that was the problem. And it wasn't financial. Like I said, the EBITDA and money, we're at a cabin and we were paying for that, and kids' college bills were getting paid. Everything was everything was comfortable. I wouldn't have traded my life. I still would go back and not trade that life. That's just the way it was, but I was not aware of what I was missing, right? I think that's where people sit. We just sit in a place and just like, hey, this is great. I can do this. I've got these freedoms, until we, open our eyes or become aware. And Yonker, who we'll talk about later, calls it just a blind spot, right? We just don't have this in our vision of looking at the mirror and saying, hey, life could actually be better than this. And how would that be possible? And, it was a very difficult time for me because I felt I was failing my daughter, right? Like I could take this on. And I think the statement I said to my wife is, I can live in this, but I'm not putting her through this. And I also didn't want, we talked about how I, got the business, kind of from my dad, with my dad, alongside my dad. And, I looked back, I got to reflect, which is fantastic, and went, my dad was nuts. He was absolutely insane to allow me to do anything he did. I was so thankful he did, but it wasn't set up in a way that I should have been successful. I mean, we were successful, but it wasn't set up in a way that we really should have been successful. I knew nothing about business. I took one accounting class and just chemistry degree. So I didn't want to repeat that. Like I knew that
What
was
were you
bad.
thinking? Like, as you're thinking about this day, like what did you want to be different? So obviously you learned a lot, you became successful. So you're probably, I don't know if it was going through your mind of like, hey, like some of that was necessary, right? Because you can't
Mhm.
shield Paige or your everybody else from growing like that. But so what did you want to be different so you could still accomplish her growth without making it too chaotic?
Yep. My goal was to kind of get it organized. Whatever that meant was not what it ended up being. It was way more organized than I thought it would be, but really to be able to carve out a position where she would have some authority and some autonomy. And it wasn't going to happen as long as I sat in the seat that I was sitting in, because everybody came to me. They'd go right around her and ask me, and then I'd have
Ah, I
to get her
got
up
it.
to date. It just, and that was okay because that was where the trust was based, and she was new, but it just wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen that way.
Hmm.
It wasn't. She was going to have to peel things out of me, and um, uh, she's smarter than me. She's got a whole bunch of great talents, but she's not as aggressive as me. So, like for me, like Dad, I got that. I'll take this. That was my nature. I'll take this all on, and she wouldn't. That's just not her nature to come in and say, "I'm ripping this out of your hands because I'll do it better than you." She just is. She just is better. She doesn't come in and have that
Hmm.
other side to her,
Hmm.
which again, who knows, good, bad, indifferent, that method got me to where I was, right? So, but I knew it had to change.
So how did
uh,
EOS fix this? And how did it set the foundation to the growth for the next few years?
yeah, so what it did is it basically created a structure where people were accountable and having to make decisions on their own without me. And I'll give you a little story. We go into the first meeting. It's pretty emotional. There's a whole bunch of team building that happens. And we get to the IDS, which is you make your list of all the things that you want to try to cover. And all the employees went, and there was probably 10 items that they thought needed to be covered. And I had made my list going into it. And I just listed off 37 items myself. The leadership team came up with 10 issues. I came up with 37. And Chris Naylor said, basically, this is what's on his plate every day when he goes home. This is what he is trying to manage. And she said, I think some of this is your responsibility. Do you guys agree that some of these are your problems, should not be even getting to his desk? But I created an environment where I was there as that resource to them, right? And I wanted to be engaged because I thought that's what business owners did. They knew everything going on in their business, and they had, I don't want to call it control, but in a way it's control, right? You're doing that. So at that point, it was an awakening for everyone. Like everybody was like, I don't know if they were necessarily apologetic, but more understanding. And she just went through the list and said, okay, whose responsibility is this part of the plant? Whose responsibility is this for customer service? And she just divvied it up. She said, this isn't Dave's. This is yours, Dick. This is yours, Steph. And just went through the whole list and said, he shouldn't even be worrying about any of this. If you guys are worth your weight, you should be taking care of this. And they were worth their weight. The proof is 5 years later, right?
Hmm.
The team that was there was worth their weight. And so that starts to get organized meetings, organized discussions, timing, don't be late for meetings. And like I'm a huge late guy, right? And I made sure that I was on time for those
Self-awareness,
meetings.
man, it's key.
Yeah. And those meetings made me be on time for those, but then the rest of my time was flexible, right? So I had 3 or 4 meetings that I needed to be in a week. Other than that, quote unquote, I could do what I wanted. And I could live in that. I can't live in a scheduled, hey, this is 9, this is your 10, that's your 11. And then at 1, that, I don't even, it gives me anxiety to even think about that. Like, oh my gosh, what's that look like? So what it did is it really organized things, and it made accountability. And then for those of you that don't know about it, it basically says when we solve a problem, we want to solve it forever, right? So up comes a shipping problem. If that makes it to us at the leadership team, we want to solve this forever. And if that's a $30,000 investment in computer software, then that has to be my answer to yes. It has to be yes. We're investing that, because if I don't want it to go away forever, then we keep limping along, limping relative
Mm-hmm.
to where we were. So it kind of brings it all together into a head and says, like, if we're going to solve this problem, we're solving it forever. That's the goal. If we can't, we're going to develop a system to get there by the end of the year. And that's what EOS also does, is it kind of lays out what your next year looks like. How do we see that looking? How do we see that developing? And then everybody picks their areas and kind of attacks it with what they call rocks. So everybody gets the main rock, and then we're supposed to put that through the company. So really, we started to get organizing, targeted towards what our goal was. And then as you're working towards that, you're held accountable every week, maybe twice a week, depending on how many meetings you're in. And then every quarter, you sit down and review how well we did. We get scored.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, it just creates this accountability. But what it did for me, as a business owner, and as an entrepreneur, or a visionary, as they call it, in the system, is it actually took a significant amount of checklists, right? Don't forgets. Shoot, I forgot, right? I mean, that's the stuff that makes you sit straight up in bed at 2:00 in the morning. You're like, holy shit, I think I forgot to do this.
Totally.
And you have a panic attack, right? So a lot of that went away, which allowed me to then, I think the term is get above the business, right? And start to look down and go, hey, man, if I can do this and we can do that. But what it also did is when I had those dreams about panic attacks, I would share that, right? Before I held that in, because I didn't want anybody to know I was freaking scared on Sunday
Right.
night,
Yeah.
right? And now you'd come in and say, hey, I had a panic attack. Is this really under control? And they'd understand it. The second thing it did is I got to be open and honest all the time, which is part of EOS, which was that honesty, telling people what's going on. And then when I thought of an idea, rather than what used to overwhelm employees, hey, I think we should go try this. They'd be like, we can't handle anymore. It's another one of Dave's chasing squirrel deals, right? Shiny object, there he goes. Instead, I got to share that and say, does this work or doesn't this work? And they thought differently. They didn't think, oh shit, here comes another one of his lame brain ideas. They
Mm-hmm.
thought, how could we tackle this, and does this make sense? And then they would be tough or hard on me, whatever that perspective would be, and just say, hey, what do you even see happening? I go, well, I see this moving in the plant. I see that going here. I see me cut. And they're like, holy shit. Now
Mm-hmm.
we can start to work on that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we were in like 2015. 16 was a down year. Right. But even in a down year, I was frustrated because we just were spending the money on traction. It didn't solve a sales problem. It doesn't miraculously solve the sales problem. You can't go, well, we have traction. Of course, the orders are going to come. But it does let everybody behind the scenes say, well, hey, we can maybe trim this expense if we want to. Is that what you want to do, Dave? Or do we just roll the dice?
Mm-hmm.
And again, taking that old spirit, I just rolled the dice. So like in 2016, I think we lost money. We probably had a positive EBITDA,
Mm-hmm.
but I just said, no, we are not stopping this, right? We are going to continue to trudge forward and make sure that we're there.
I want to pull that string because I can tell you brushed over it like it was nothing. But so you lost money, but you had a positive EBITDA. And this is kind of showing the things that you've learned over the last handful of years, where your net income isn't directly correlated to your EBITDA and the value of your company. And, Dave, like, as you and you don't have to touch on that right now if you want to wait till the end, kind of as you're getting to this part. In EOS, there's this kind of arbitrary, like, how are people picking rocks? And I've had this issue with EOS forever. And even though I love it for organization, accountability, and KPIs and meeting cadence, but like it's still up to the owner or the executive team to figure out what they're marching towards. And typically it's revenue or just random things that people want to do compared to growing value. And like you had talked about, investing in your business, which would make a positive EBITDA. It's like, how did your goals change over time? And does that make sense? Because I think this is a big issue that people have. And again, you don't have to cover it right now, but I just want to make sure that we touch on it.
Yeah, I'll just touch on it now. I didn't understand it. I mean, the reality is that I looked at the P&L and going, holy shit, we lost 70 grand. Like, this sucks. I really didn't make this money that I said took home in my salary. I actually lost money. I didn't even understand it. I mean, My dad kind of understood it. The bank, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Elmo Bank understood it completely. Like, you're fine. Your cash flow covers everything. You're in a good place. And we were communicating like, hey, this is what we're doing. We got to fix some of these things. But I think probably in a roundabout way, my awareness to the value of the business came probably 2 years later, when I started to really engage even more my bank. And he told me about a book called Unlocking Private Company Wealth. And what was so interesting is, like, I said to him, I'm turning in personal financial statements. Everything's personally guaranteed. All along, my dad finally got off personal guarantees, I think in 16 or 17. I mean, that's how long it
Yeah.
took for them to release them. And that's not because it was wrong of them to hold them to it. It's just that's how long it took for the company to become, our debt was low.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't making money, but we had no debt, right? So we were kind of a debt-free. Only family debt was in there. So it wasn't a lot of risk on their part at this point. But I think what happened is that mind shift happened during EOS, creating a business that would be strong. And then again, things EOS doesn't do, EOS doesn't find sales, right? It doesn't find those things. So that then fully came onto my shoulders, which in EOS, what happens, it's a really interesting process. The person that understands EOS the best understands the book. The execution in your company will somewhat control the mood and how it goes, because they can nitpick their way through. And that's what we as entrepreneurs aren't good at, right? It's like, how is the P&L? And you're like, I don't know. When do I have to answer this by? Like, I'll find out. And they can pick their way through. Hey, here's a problem, solve this. So in the first year, it was super frustrating for us, the creatives, like these salespeople that just like make deals and make things happen, because we didn't have the proper form filled out. Like, we weren't following this structure. And we're like, screw this. Like, we just want to go sell. But what it really did is it was painful. And then as we started to get our sales team like more organized, because we're dynamic people by nature, like, it's like, I got this, I'll go get it. And we started to correct that. So our sales corrected. And then I think what happened is I started to recognize that we were going to be making money, right? So that's when my mind shift changed. So maybe 2007, 2 years in, I'm like, holy crap, because we're filling out this form and I'm right, we're going to make money. And it's going to be, I still didn't understand EBITDA, but we're going to actually make money. I got to figure out a bonus system, right? So it started to create other things, like we can make money if we hit these. And then it aligned. I think that's when the whole aha moment was, like, if we start to hit these numbers and hit these goals, we then are in a great place. Because if the plant can deliver, which is now their responsibility, not mine, and I can keep these sales going, or if we miss a sale, we have to bring another in. So that happened in organization. So I think, we'll get to probably when I really, really understood EBITDA and growth of the asset. But in that 17, 18, the book helped me looking at it. And the book is really blunt in there. Things like it says, your business will not be yours, whether it's by death, divorce, or sale, or transfer to your children. It's not going to forever be yours. And I'm like, wow, like, I guess I can't control this my whole life. So, now if we jump to like 2017-ish and we start to make money, and now we're looking at real reinvestment, $800,000 of reinvestment in equipment, right? Real hiring of people that we don't need yet. Like, hey, if we're going to do this in the spring, do you think we should hire 3 people? Probably. Swallow, breathe, right? Try to because you're spending money you don't have at this point, right? And that kind of got us going. And then all of a sudden, I created a family spreadsheet for myself that showed all my assets that I have and how they were valued. And that's when I started to understand the beginning of EBITDA. That was it, because I said, what's this company really even worth? If we make 500 grand, I always believed it was worth $8 million. I don't know where the hell I got the number. I don't know why it was. That's what I thought it was worth. And then when I understood the math through this book, I went, well, this thing isn't worth much, right? Like, I'm dumping $1 million into a business that's worth 2. This doesn't seem too smart. And I looked at other assets I had, like stock market or other things. I'm like, hey, well, that one grew 10%. What my business? So I just created a spreadsheet and I laid it all out and looked at it all and started to measure the EBITDA. And then with the business change, again, we recognized I needed a new national sales manager. Paige was busy. She was doing a job that we needed for our retail division. She could no longer be the national sales manager for our industrial division. And we went, wow, but this came out in the meeting and people would ask me these tough questions. We found the right guy. I started courting him as soon as I could, right? And just, and I got him. I got him because of how we ran the company, and he was interested in it, and he came on, and then that shifted a lot of things. And as we look like at 2017, it was kind of like a breaking point. We actually made a significant amount of money, significant being hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Hmm.
right? It actually, I thought it would move the needle, right? We went from, again, paying myself well, doing all the things we small business owners get the benefits of, but then also I'm like, wow, this is pretty, we can actually make money. Like, and probably the EBITDA was, I don't know, 800, 900 grand. Well, now there's some value there, right? There's a little bit of something there. And then really what happened is a new national sales manager, some other things from our retail division. We were kind of early in, not the earliest. That started to pick up, and then we could really see this growth. And that's when I started to dump a lot of money in, because without the capacity to produce the product, we couldn't keep up. In 15, 16, 17, we had all this capacity sitting there and we couldn't sell it. And so, then it kind of shifted, and we went on from there. And again, the unlocking private company wealth was really important. It also told the story in there about a guy who was going to buy a fishing boat that had a $20 million business, and he had to go get a loan. And I think that's
Oh,
how
is
we
that eye opening or what?
and I
Yeah.
mean that's how we all feel, I think,
I think that's so
right?
true, isn't it?
Yeah, you're like, how am I going to buy this fishing boat? And you're like, well, I better go get a loan on it, because God knows if I need the
Cash for
50
the business.
grand. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
been there, done that,
so
man.
yeah, so he tells, and then we can reflect on that, right? We can all look and go, well, that's kind of a real thing. So, EOS was fantastic. We ran it till we still are trying to run it internally to this PE group, because it's the only way our company knows to talk. It's our communication method. It's our system. How far it goes from there, we'll find out. We would like to get it
And
further out
around
into
this
the
time,
company.
Dave, you started to look outside for more help too, right? There was
Oh
some
yeah,
other
yeah.
places that you were starting to get resources now that you had some of this freed up time, right?
I did, yeah. So great point. So in that time frame, in 17, 18 time frame, Chris Naylor introduced me to a CEO group that I went to, and that was prior. I was 17, I think, and it was just awesome to go in and talk about family stuff that's going on. It's all confidential. You can talk about how good or bad your business is and how frustrating it is, and you're hearing stories all around. But what you get is the cross wisdom, right? Different
Hmm.
different industries that can share stuff with you, different people that have a perspective. And I think we talked about this before. I love learning. So they would recommend somebody to talk to. I would call that person. They would, they'd bring in a speaker. I would follow up. You were one of those guys, right? You came in and talked to us as a group. I didn't miss a minute of that because it was so insightful, and I felt like somebody knew better. And I don't know if we touched on this last time, but my perspective early in business was maybe a bad one, which was, if I reach out to someone else, it shows weakness in my ability to run the company. So let's just say I was 30 in the year 2000, and if I would have called the consultant, what did that say about me? What did it say to my dad? What did it say to my friends?
Hmm.
And I think that's part of your ego that gets in the way of maybe doing the right thing, even though you're really freaking struggling, and you could really use help. But it
Where
just
does
was
that
like, I'm not
narrative
calling.
come from, do you think, Dave? Because I've talked about this and you've probably heard plenty of the podcasts about it. It's like, where did that come from for you?
I don't know. Um, that's going to take a while to unwind that one, but
Maybe another
I
session with Yonker,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. You know what? If I had to say where it came from, it's your insecurity, and I would say, insecure business owners are probably the most successful. It's and I say that if you get it fixed.
I was just
That's
gonna say you can't, because like staying isolated and trying to control yourself, you're gonna be tapped out and burnt out and who knows what.
Yeah, it's insecurity, and nobody ever did a review on me, right? I mean, I didn't have a review for first 15 years of work. Nobody said, "Hey, Dave, you could improve on this," and you're kind of afraid of it because I think you think you're a failure in some way. You're thinking you're a failure, or you feel really good one day and really bad the next, and you just really didn't want to tap into that insecurity and that weakness that you may have of lack of knowledge or something you can't learn. Yeah, it's certainly not healthy. I mean,
Did the peer group help you overcome that, you think?
for sure. Yeah, the openness in there, like people were telling they were struggling, and then I got to share my stories and even talk about family stuff going on that is scary to us. And you also get to talk about things. I think that obviously your podcast touches on a lot of wealthy people, that are telling a story. And those aren't things you can necessarily tell in your, you know,
The
hockey
bonfire of
group,
your
your
high school
softball
buddies.
league. Yeah, you can't do it. So I think when you got there, you kind of felt like you could say anything, like, not true statements, but yeah, we're losing $1 million this year, and I'm scared shitless.
Right.
Right? Do you tell your wife that, or do you tell your peer group? You tell your peer group, because they can help you to find a banker, find investment. Those are the things you can say in there because it's all confidential. And you can also say, hey, look, I think we're going to make 15 million bucks this year, and I don't know what I should do. And they can all be happy for you. You're not saying it out of ego. They can understand, like, I don't know, well, let's help. I contacted this guy, and they're all there to solve, like EOS, solve that problem together.
It's like people like understand the numbers, right? Like I was sitting down and talking. I think it was actually one of the conferences we were at, and I was like, someone said to me, "I won't talk to any advisor that truly doesn't understand working capital." I was just like, yes, because it's not,
Yeah.
like there's so much to be said about when you say 15 million. You and I both know that's 15 million in revenue. Then you take all your costs, and so there's so much context in your head for these big numbers that someone that makes 100 grand as an income doesn't necessarily understand. So I think it's crucial,
Yep.
man. You sit down with these peer groups or other people that understand that stuff and can put everything into context.
They do, and they balance you out, and they're supposed to be open and honest, which is one of the best things that happened. EOS, that peer group, they're supposed to tell you that you need help, right? That's what your job is in there, and it's very refreshing, and that got me connected to other people, other consultants, people like you, and a guy that was a branding specialist, and other free information, books that people read, and those kind of things start to just broaden your world when you've been, again, prior to 2015, trapped in
Mhm.
the day to day, overwhelmed in the day to day. And then you start to look out and you get above it and you start to look down and you see maybe what you have. You might have something special. And the other thing in that group, we talked about this too in your boot camp, is, I was super fortunate. My dad decided to invest that money in 1992 into an epoxy manufacturing business. That wasn't my choice, right? That was just it was just luck. It just happened to be that the effort that we put in as a family happened to be worth something in 2020. That it could have been. I mean, there's 10,000 things that don't even exist today, right? That were in 1992 that looked really good. So some of it
So
is.
true, man. David, I think that's a beautiful comment because I was actually listening to one of John Warlow's podcasts over this weekend, and this guy who just sold his company for an insane amount of money, who was pretty arrogant most of the interview. At the end, he goes, "But what most of your guests don't say is half this shit is luck." I
Right.
was like, I'm glad he admitted it. Like, cause but just like him, just like what you said, is what he chose to spend his life on for 20 years happened to be worth a pile of money in
Yeah.
today's world. You just interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, family businesses, I believe really, really strongly in them. I believe less strongly in them now than I did 10 years ago.
Why is that?
Because I think you really have to measure the talent in your company. Now, I was talented, Paige is talented, but the second thing, which maybe we can get to, I can touch on later, but I'll just throw this out, is that I think when you get a really, really successful business, transferring that to your family is nearly impossible to do it equitably with four children, one who's involved, three who aren't, and of business value that's significant. They can't buy it from you anymore. So unless there's people that have done it. And so here goes my next story, right? If I wanted to do that, I probably would have joined another peer group that had done it, because I had no idea how to transfer this kind of business to get my money out
Hmm.
so that I can do the things I want with my lovely wife and enjoy that time while supporting one of my children.
Hmm.
Or do the rest of the children all get something? And that is a really tricky mechanism in a small enough business. Maybe mom and dad can pay out the
Yeah.
other
More
kids.
like the
The
jobs, like
talented.
the acquisition entrepreneur, like you and I've talked about. Like, you talk about
Yeah.
the bigger numbers and like unless and it's kind of like what my dad and I were doing with it. Unless I was gonna go raise my own fund and buy him out, it was just like, okay, this is gonna have to be an insane seller's note for a long time. And I don't
Yeah.
know if this is like years and years ago, Dave. I interviewed this one guy, big estate planning, family business consultant, and he pretty much what his theory is, Dave, is every family business should sell no matter what. But even if it's the kid, they have to buy it at fair market value in order to make everything equitable. Just essentially what you're talking about. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're talking advanced gifting and estate planning and turmoil. And essentially, the peer groups you're probably talking about are essentially just how to navigate personalities.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
and I think, man, it's complicated. The other thing that I learned is how much pressure goes onto that person, and that was Yonkers. So I mean, like I'm still taking all this pressure on, right? I mean, it's all on me. You know, my dad's not having to put any more money, and that's mostly going in by me and what the company's making. But we're still at the point where it needs money and it needs sleepless nights and it needs people worrying. You know, even though you're starting to really make money, and then let's go to probably what 2019, early 2019, right? I start to recognize in this process, like this thing is probably going to be worth some money. I got a great national sales manager. I got these things lined up. I'm running a successful business, and I look at a sheet of paper and go, here's my number that I can actually make this year, and here's how much money I'm going to take out at the end of the year. And Jenny and I are going to go do something with this money, right? We're going to do something. I don't know what it is. We're going to do
Hmm.
something. Well, and the same old story happens. We get to the end of the year and I pay my taxes and all the rest of the money sitting in the company. So I have a great year and it's EBITDA, it's actually profit, right? Our EBITDA now, as a portion of EBITDA, our profits are gobbling up more. So
Hmm.
let's just say in those early years, my EBITDA was all depreciation, amortization, all those things that I can't spend that are getting sucked out. And then as we started to make money, let's just say we made $1 million, we would have $400,000 of EBITDA on top of that, or the other stuff would be 400,000 bucks more. So there's still a million. And you say, well, shit, we got this made, $1,400,000 in cash flow. I should get some money out. And we'd get to the end of the year and I'd be like, there is nothing. How is this possible? There's nothing. Now I'm making triple what I ever made and I still have nothing.
So
So
explain that, because like I've pulled on this, and because I think a lot of, I mean, anybody that's run a business can understand what you're saying, but it's just
yeah,
like, so when you get to the end of the year, you're sitting down with your CPA and you're going, "Well, great, that's what my financials look like, but where's the money?"
yeah. And your statement of working capital, like everybody listening to this should look up the word working capital and pay $500, send out their books and tell them what working capital is and what happens if their business grows by 30%. It's insane. So we were growing. We were about like 7 million in sales. We started to grow and we were at like 9 million, and then we went to 13 million, and then we hit 17 million. So if you start taking those chunks, and let's think about this as a perspective too, like 7 to 9 is $2 million. So that's let's call that maybe a third of your business in growth. So you need maybe a third more employees, maybe, probably not. And then you go from 9 to 12. Now that's another third. So we went in 2 years, we almost doubled the size of our business in your financial needs, your employees, and everything else. So that's a lot to manage. If I was doing it alone, how would I possibly know how many shipping guys I needed? How many guys in that area? How many people are processing paperwork? Like we were hiring people to just do paperwork. I went, paperwork, doesn't the computer system do paperwork? No, we need a person to file it. There's so much paper. And then you go from, then you go to 12 million. There's changes. I think you've talked about this in a lot of podcasts. There's times where you're not really making any money because you've now put a layer of middle management in that has to be cleared in order for you to get to the next hurdle.
Hmm. Well,
So
and then again, especially in your business with manufacturing, Dave, it's a lot different than SaaS. And this is where working capital, like when private equity firms look at working capital needs, there's PE firms that'll go straight at SaaS because they can put millions of dollars in and there's no inventory they need to buy,
yeah,
versus going, okay, how much epoxy, how many much more machinery, like what's going on? And your working capital can go from 1.5 to $4 million by growing
yeah,
like that. And you're going, and that's your cash. That's what you're supposed to be buying your boats with, right?
that is. And so you get, if you made $1 million, let's just say that's the number, and you pay, what the wonderful state of Minnesota is going to get, probably 10% of that money, and the feds are going to get, 36%, and then don't forget about the FICA and all the other stuff that's snuck out the back door. And you got 500 grand. So you certainly better hope your inventories and receivables don't go by 500 grand, or you're going to have to go borrow money. Right. And if you grew by $3 million and you only need 500 grand, it's a freaking miracle. It's a freaking miracle if you can get that done. It's like,
Uh,
so, it's the greatest times of your life,
Well, I
right? As you're
want
going
this is
through this.
great because I want to put it like let's remember this as we because I know we've got about a half hour and
Okay. Yep.
you've got such a good story about getting into the actual sale and I want to kind of get into that, but I think working capital in this situation was part of your decision making and the education that you went through allowed you to even understand this. So like we can
It
come
did.
back to this as you're making your decisions,
Sure.
but so where did you as you're kind of feeling this and this is like and I don't know like as you're describing the situations, I think a lot of entrepreneurs know that this is a thing. Like everybody knows, like I'm short of money, I have no money at the end of the year, like and they understand this, but they don't know how to articulate it because they don't know that hey, that's actually called working capital. I mean, a lot of people
Right.
do, but or they don't know how to correctly assess what their needs are going to be. So you can understand it, but you don't clearly see it. So it's kind of just hoping. So how did you go from this kind of understanding and feeling this pain and this being trapped in getting yourself out? So let's kind of get to the point, get to the point where you're trying to figure out what's next.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hired a fractional controller. Is what I did next. Yeah. So I, I brought somebody in that just understood numbers. Fantastic. He understood it. He had to do a lot of cleanup first because our systems weren't great, blah, blah, blah. But eventually we got to the point where he was forcing me uncomfortably to try to predict where we were going to be so he could predict cash flows. And we started to look out 18 months. And I would say, hey, we're going to grow by $6 million. And he'd go, here's my averages. I just ran them down. Here's your cash needs. I went, what? Like, how is this like, this is great. Like, what the hell? Where's this is no fun anymore. Like all the money that you want to go to the country club and sit down and play poker with your buddies and go, hey, by the way, I made, blah, blah, blah. And it's all a joke. There's nothing to spend. There's no money there. And I'll fast forward this because I think there's really some great events that happened in 2020, which are just unbelievable. So in 19, the PE group that ended up buying me actually communicated with me and said, hey, we'd be interested in buying you. You fit into our profile. And unsolicited call, we get a ton of them. But what happened is that my buddy in business sold to them. So my buddy calls me and goes, hey, these guys have been calling you. You should really talk to him. I went, what do you think? And he's like, no, I'm telling you, man, it's a life changer. It changes your life. Like I can only speak about it. I'm right in the middle of it. So I kind of queue up some of these calls and I'm a truth teller. I'm not going to BS somebody because if they ever go back and look at my books, they're going to see that I lied to them in some process. So I'd say, here's where we're at. Here's what I think we're doing. So I learned how to communicate to a PE group through my fractional controller and some of the stuff I'm not yet to your class, but some of the stuff that I'm learning from your podcast. Like I got to understand this. So I'm starting to build this relationship with this group and communicating once a quarter, painful, like we hit our numbers, we didn't, and here's what we see, and just communicating. And then now that we're going to kind of fast forward to the beginning of 2020, and our business did really well in 2019, and EBITDA was great. I was in Florida, and I had started to talk to Yonker in December. So I'm going to just brush on this. I
Yeah.
got some professional help, right? I got back in 2019, went on a vacation in December, was driving to work. I forgot a banana. I have a banana every day for my snack, right? Whatever habits. Forgot the banana. And I just been down with some friends in Florida. We had a wonderful time, stayed at their family's condo and spent a lot of money in a bar. And it was awesome. One of the best times I've ever had. Big Ten football game on. I'm buying shots for Wisconsin fans as we end up getting destroyed by Ohio State, but I'm with a bunch of Ohio people. It was awesome, right? And I get home, I'm driving in my car, going to work. I forget my banana. And dude, I wig out. Like I was self-deprecating. I said, what kind of person does this? People can't afford Christmas. You're an asshole. Like who spends that kind of money in a bar when your employees can't do this? And I was really, really tough on myself. And I felt I deserved it. I mean, like I deserved that lashing. And again, we're making money, right? The company's really successful. I'm probably considered a successful guy. I have to pull over. I stop the car because I'm like, I have to fix this. And I had listened to your podcast with Chris Yonker probably, I don't know, 4 weeks before. And I parked the car, put on the podcast. I listened to the whole podcast again. And I called you right after. And I said, I got to talk to Chris Yonker. And you connected me. And so then we started to unwrap like this image I had of myself, how scarce money was to me, how much respect I had for money, because I was learning that whatever my bar tab was, I can't get back. It's gone, right? I can't get that money back. So now I'm having disrespect for what I felt to my employees who were struggling every day, right? To pay bills or do whatever. What kind of guy does this, right? So Chris, he really started to unwind it. He was like, fill out these forms. We go through a form. And I, in that form, he said, it's got these really super simple statements that made me cry. Like, life is, my family means this to me. And you're like, holy crap. Like, I don't think about this. Me, life was stressful. That's what it was. I mean, I was just living one giant ball of stress, because as soon as I thought I was successful in some part of my life, like business, like making more money than I ever thought I would make or whatever, I'm in a parking lot freaking out over a banana. Like, how is that
I'm
possible?
sorry, I know, and the reason I feel like it's okay to appropriate to laugh is because that you now are
Yeah,
acknowledging the fact that it's a big thing. But I get it, man. I think that this is where so many people that, whether they're listening to this or they're on their own, and they just get to this point and they don't know how to get out of the chaos.
yep, yeah, and that's well said. And also our framework, like my framework, he said, like success comes from hard work and suffering. That's what I believed. I mean, that's how I got everything, right? I mean, I suffered through a fire. I didn't get to sleep on Sunday nights. I'd go in and do like everything was about how much I could freaking take to get to the next level, and make sure that, my, at this point, probably 30 employees were happy. Their kids were happy. My wife was happy. My dad was happy. My brother, who was a shareholder, is happy. Like, all I'm worried about is that these 100 people are happy. And I'm going to just put that on my back. I got it. Right. I'll carry us through this. And that was, it was really hard. So like, now we have to picture, right? I now know that I'm not going to get any money to spend. Right. I'm now wigging out about spending, again, reasonable amount of money, probably based on how much money I made at a bar,
Mhm.
for getting a 39%. And now it's all coming together, and Chris starts to unwind this. So at the same time that that's unwinding, I've registered for your intentional growth class, right? And I take my daughter, because I wanted she and I to be on the same page of what's going to happen with this business. And I said, we want to grow this thing. So I'm working through where my brain is at with my life, like what I've been through, getting my wife, current wife, right, pregnant while we were dating, getting through college too fast, working for my dad at a young age, absorbing all that stress, having 4 kids, right, getting through all these things. Like, what does that build up into a person, right? Chris is unwinding that while I'm trying to recognize, like, what do I have here? So now I'm going through that. I'm talking to Chris. I'm in Florida just on a business trip. I get a call. My mom has a stroke, and she's in Arizona. My mom and dad are in Arizona. I'm in Florida. And my dad waits 4 freaking days to call me. So I was in California, flew to Florida, right? And I'm like, Dad, like, shit, man, I was 30 minutes away from you by plane flight, and you didn't call me. And he's like, okay. And I said, I got to finish this, then I'm going to get home and get on a plane. And I flew down to Arizona. Take me a deep breath here, but I fly down there and my mom's okay, right? She's lost movement in part of her body. They're 80. And I go in and I see my dad. He's in good spirits. He's just freaking a great guy. And we were just having drinks at night, right? We go see my mom. She had to sleep a lot and then do all this. And I said to him, I said, Dad, I've been talking to this PE firm, and, I think here's the number I think that I can get to based on these numbers and everything else. And I said, I don't know what to do, because it's, that we can get this thing to be a, worth $100 million. Like, that's what I'm thinking still, right? We're now in early February. And he says, well, you know what I would do? I can tell you what I would do. I go, what would you do? He goes, I'd sell it. I said, it's that easy? He goes, yeah. Why would you not sell the company? And it's worth that. Just get out. Like, what? Like, how's that? Like, there's all this stuff. He goes, well, I don't care. He said, your mom just had a stroke. The best years of our lives were from 50 to 65.
That's really cool.
Right? He said, it's the
I don't
best.
think
He
you ever
goes,
told me that.
those years were worth so much money, Dave. He said, I'd give it all up. He said, right now, yeah, I play golf. Your mom will, hopefully be able to walk and do all these things with me and be there. But those years, I would not trade that for anything. And he said, I gave up a lot. Like, he basically let me run the company, and he was in Arizona.
I was gonna
And
say, I think I remember from the last interview that I'm assuming his golden years started at 50, and 50, did he turn 50 6 days after the fire? Because that was when he was on the plane. Just like, have
yeah,
fun, Dave.
yeah, and well, yeah, it's funny because he was a little bit older than that, but 50 is when I went to the company, right? That was the deal.
Okay.
So he got time down there, and then
Yeah.
at 60 he retired, which was 2000, and then 66, right? Yeah, he's washing his hands. He's like, you got this, right? So all those things kind of came into play, and I said, well, I got to think about this, and I had to reflect deeply on where I was raising 4 kids, and hopefully being a good dad, which I think I was. I think I was a good husband. Stressed, lack of attention, yes. Always have something to do, yes. And I just didn't have a perspective. So now I don't even know what that, you and I have talked about this a lot. I didn't even know what that money was worth.
Hmm.
Like nobody's going to walk in your door and go, by the way, if you have $5 million cash, here's what this looks like, your
Hmm.
life. Here, if you have 7, here's what this looks like. If you have 10 million cash, this is what your life looks like and how much you can spend. We as entrepreneurs always believe making $1 million today is better than getting 10 million in my checking account because I can do this for 10 years and then still sell it.
Isn't that the truth, dude?
Yeah,
Like it's just the constant. Well, if I just did this for another, and then it's this hamster wheel, constant.
it's
And it's truly, it's so interesting, Dave, because as you and I have been in part of all these CEO peer groups and people have been thinking about this, it's like everybody thinks there's this huge baby boomer tsunami that's going to happen. I'm like, if you just look at the numbers of how many companies are out there, and out of the 6 million privately held companies, 5.6 are underneath 5 million in revenue, and the three multiple hamster wheel where debt, taxes, and I'm like, they can't afford to sell. So this tsunami and this wealth transfer, I'm like, I don't
yeah,
think it's like really a thing, man. Like this is all
it's
just
hard.
locked into jobs that have personal guarantees.
It is, and it's really hard. And so you have to get out of that, right? I mean, that's the part that I started to try to grasp and learn. And then we get through this. My dad makes this wonderful comment to me, right? And just basically says, I would sell it. I went, well, what the hell? I fly home. I tell Jenny, my dad said you'd sell it. And she's like, yeah, I've been telling you that for years. And now Chris is unwinding what makes me feel fulfilled and what makes me happy, right? Which I never got to address. I didn't
Hmm.
address that till, well, December when I had a banana freak out of 19. It's the first time I addressed what I needed. I say that Jenny would tell you, like, I took care of myself. Like I did run and I did triathlons, I did things, but really my mind was always consumed by that business. So now we're going through this. We do your intentional growth workshop, and I say to Paige, it's like, maybe if this thing's worth this much money, you just can't buy it. Maybe I should just sell it and do this. And it's like, Dad, you got to do whatever makes you happy, right? This whole generation, by the way, that we've raised, some of it drives me nuts, but some of it also they understand that way younger than I did at 50. So we sit there and we get out, and now we have to just go. So now it's like February 14th, I think, or something. It's Valentine's Day-ish when we complete the class. I'm hammering out spreadsheets. I'm contacting you and Pat, trying to get shit organized, right? I see you, I think, I don't know, another couple weeks later, I think in Florida.
Yeah,
And
we were
then,
there when the whole market was crashing, and you and I were doing presentations. We're like, "What's going on here?"
yeah, and, and that's COVID, right? And COVID
Yeah.
hits and like, this COVID thing's a joke, whatever. And then all of a sudden I go to California again, get back, and all of a sudden the numbers I was talking to my dad about in January, I looked at my wife and said, we're screwed. It's over. Like all that money that I didn't take a year ago or close in December, whatever this looks like, regret, looking backward, regret. I went, man, I hosed this deal big. She goes, you'll be fine. I'm like, I know, but now it's all on me. Now it's me. Now I've got to be the hero again. Like I was just getting unwound with Chris a little bit. Like I don't need to be a hero anymore. I don't need this
It's all
burden.
back on
I
you
went
now.
through your Yeah, I went through your class, checked out of those 60 boxes, the ones that affected me, which ones I could deal with. And I started to really get a framework of like who I really want to be. And that sounds crazy at 50, but the guy that I wanted to be to show up as every single day. And then now we're in March, COVID, plants are supposed to shut down. We can stay open because we make stuff for the reverse osmosis world, which needs to keep running. Our plant is running. And dude, my business freaking doubles. It was the most insane events. As that's happening, we're trying to hire people to bring them in. One of my best distributors is doing really, really well. My industrial business is down, but it's stabilized. Everything's going nuts. All of a sudden I start, because now I'm paying attention to financials, I'm paying attention to my EBITDA. I call my dad. It's now, let's just say June-ish. I call my dad and I go, hey, Dad, I think the value of the business doubled. And he's like, you're selling it, right? This was not a question. This was not advice. He goes, you're selling it, right? And I said, well, I think I should. So I go, and again, super close. My closest best friends on the planet were at our cabin over 4th of July. And I told them all, like, we've never talked finances, man. It just doesn't come up. And I said to him, you guys, I got to be super blunt with you. I know you're the only guys I can talk to about this, because you couldn't go up to somebody in the street and say, like, my net worth just doubled, right? And I told them what I think the company was worth, and they all looked at me like, you're selling it, right? So I get back, I contact the PE group. So I think I'm ready to sell. They fly in, and again, not an auction, right? I knew they told me They needed my facilities. They said they need to keep my employees. A lot of trust going on. My buddy that sold to him, trust there. I talked to another one of their owners, previous people that sold to him, trust there. So I was building trust with this. I really didn't want to go through an auction. I don't know why. It wasn't my nature, but it checked as I did that sheet with you. I think there's 50 or 60 questions. The 7 that I had issues with, I actually got to highlight them as their goes now. My employees were safe. My plant got kept. They were going to continue to do growth. I didn't have to keep money in. So I looked at an ESOP kind of with you briefly, and an ESOP meant if 2 years from now the shit hit the fan, they still owe me money. I still got to go back and save the company. If 3 years from now the whole economy takes a dump, nobody's calling me to come back. And that was what I determined with Chris is what I needed. Right.
I was just gonna say
I
if I
needed
could
that.
if I could make a comment there because I don't without trying to like get it out of you. Like when I was having this conversation with you, Dave, and I think it's so interesting to have watched that unfold with you because you were looking to create value, create options, and you and I had some long conversations about just the differences. Like I mean, like who cares what the outcome is? It's only what's happy for you that checks the financial boxes and the first principle driver boxes. And as you and I were talking about ESOP versus P. I'm like, Dave, you're already worth this. It's just locked
Right.
in your business. And you were talking, I just don't want to do insurance anymore. I just don't want to do these things. And I'm like, you could hire those things away. But what I had noticed, Dave, and you came to this after, and I will give you absolutely every ounce of credit because you pounded your head against the wall trying to figure this out so you could be happy. Like you were
I
you were
did. Yep.
going through like ESOP compared to this, how much money up front, what's in like you were not just making a rash decision. Or that's not
No,
the right word. Like you weren't just making a knee-jerk decision. You were just like, okay, I now know that this is what I want. So I don't know if you got any comments on that. And then I also want to talk about why you didn't go this alone without an investment banker. So those two
sure.
things I want to make sure we unpack.
Yep. So let me address the one. The timing was I made the decision to sell it, right? And I they wanted to close on a certain date, and I verbally said okay, and then I didn't call them back for 6 weeks. For anybody, people that know me will understand this. Like, dude, I was in the fetal position bawling most nights, like just sobbing, like it's over. Like, what have I done? I'm selling to the big bad PE group. I'm a
Mhm.
terrible person. Like, I was reliving that. And fortunately, I had Yonker there to support. Like, why are you feeling that? Like, who do you owe this to? Like, don't you owe this to your wife? Like, can Jenny be playing this game of like you owe something to her, or she is important? And they would call me and I said, hey, I'm not quite ready. I'm looking at numbers, but I was really in turmoil, man. Like I wasn't there. And I think I told you this. I went out to dinner with these guys and I cried at the dinner table when I had to, like I said, hey, I can handle this. I can do this. I think I can help here. And then I started to talk about my employees and what they were going to do. And I started crying at the dinner table. And I thought, boy, there's a good way to just write a check that is now gone. Like who would, but what I didn't realize is that built a ton of trust with them because they knew what was important to me. And that was, with the numbers they were talking about, my family was good. It put all of it onto who I was as a human being and how I was going to treat others. And that's what reflection did to me. August, a dear friend of mine passed away in a plane crash, right? I wouldn't call him like a guy I talked to all the time, but I knew him. We did hunting stuff together, died in a plane crash. And then that triggered me and I went, holy crap. I called him back up and I said, hey, I'm thinking, just give me a couple of weeks. I'm going to engage an investment banker, right? So now I'm starting this investment banking thing, interviewed 3 investment bankers, chose to go with Prairie Capital. Wonderful. It took them time to get things queued up and I wasn't quite ready. I went on an elk hunt and I was with a dear friend of mine, one of the guys that was at my cabin, and got done with the elk hunt. And you just have time, right? You have time to just be with yourself. I had a guide, but you're out there and you're just really one with the world. And that's what I love and that's what I believe in, right? Is being part of this planet and doing soul searching, and all that happens when you're clear. And I came down and said to my buddy, I'm like, it's a done deal. I'm selling it for sure now. It's over. Like I'm selling it. I'm going to get out as fast as I can. I recognize that I don't need all that other stuff. I don't need that stress anymore. I don't need to be worth 100 million on paper. I don't need to be worth 50 million on paper. I don't need to be worth anything, because if I get out of this deal where it sits today, my family's taken care of. But that's how long it took from the decision July 4th till basically October 1st. emotionally to get me there, along with the help of even Prairie Capital in the process. So
And
it was deep.
it's deep, but like the one question I have for you right now, are you happy?
Oh, dude, I'm thrilled. Yeah, could not be happier.
That's the
Yeah,
point of all this hard work, right?
it is. Yeah, and it came with pain, man. Even the due diligence, everything is pain because I would sit up in the middle of the night going, why did I sell this thing? I know our sales are going to be 20% over. And my lovely bride is like, why are you doing this? She'd just say, who cares? Like, why can't you just enjoy this? And I don't know why that is. Yonker and I are still working on it because I'm still having that same feeling from time to time. It's like, why do I have to look back? And I guess we could talk about the sale for 3 minutes, but the group was
Before we,
really good.
yeah, as we
Oh
get
yeah,
into
go
some of
ahead.
those mechanical questions, so there's this, you and I, like the situation that you went through where you have, so the PE firm was backing one of your, was it a vendor or was it a supplier? I can't remember what it was. Well, supplier's a vendor, but like there was some there, like the PE firm was backing someone that you were already working with, right?
It was a buddy of mine sold to them. Yep.
Right. And so like there was this, the reason I bring that up is because it becomes kind of like the strategic no-brainer. Like you can kind of visualize how things work. You've got them knocking on your door. And you and I kept having this conversation, like, because you're like, hey, Ryan, like, let's just kind of do this together. I'm like, dude, even if I had a business like yours, I would still hire someone to have these conversations with me. Doesn't mean the investment banker should get the same fee. And that's what you and I kept talking about. Is like, Dave, if you're going to sell to a third party, you're like, you've ex-nayed everything else, you still should have someone control the process to manage the conversations, to split the, divide the roles and responsibilities. Because I said, if you wanted to truly take this to an auction and control, and like you could, that's one option, but you could still have someone go down and have the dialogue. So explain like your process of understanding that and how you got comfortable with that this was the right approach, and maybe explain like whether it was the right approach or not approach, and like
Yeah.
kind of how that experience went.
It ended up being the right approach. There were moments in time where I thought it was the wrong approach, and the reason was is all the work still comes back to me. So when you're doing due diligence, there's only so much they know. And then as I was hammering through that due diligence, I'm like, where's the money? Like, what? I paid them. I'm paying them. Hopefully, right? If the deal gets closed, all this money, and they're not here for me. But what happened is that early on, I needed their advice to put a target for me to know that I was getting the right price. So that's worth something. That not worth the total amount that I paid, but they basically said, here's the range we think it's worth. And when their offer came in, it fell in the middle to upper side of that. So I'm like, hey, it's a fair offer. I checked every box. So I didn't need another 2 million, 6 million, 10 million for me to be happy. I just need to know that I was doing the right value at the right time.
Yep.
So that was early on. Then you go through this really dark period where you're like trying to hammer out information. They're buffering some stuff, and it's really on you and your leadership team. I engaged my leadership team early because I needed their help. We talked about it. They weren't thrilled, of course. They were disappointed, but they understood and they were happy for me. And then here's what happens. So you get late in the game and the details are coming through, and there's some hiccups. There's some hiccups that happen, and a couple statements that I love. The No Ego book, right? What does great look like from here? That's a statement I read 5 years ago. I use it all the time. Like, you just got to hit the reset button. So I'm basically, again, having panic attacks. Like I'm just, it's just a tremendous pressure. I basically worked every day from October 15th through New Year's Eve, right, to get it done. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just what happens. And so you're under so much stress. But that, like, what does great look from here? The deal changed. The deal changed 2 days before close because of some things. I won't get into those details. And I had to say, what does great look like from here? And I called my attorney and said, I'm gonna move forward. I would have taken this offer that's on the table in the beginning. I'm gonna take it now, even though it's changed, and I still have an opportunity to get whole. Right? I still have an opportunity to get whole. I'm just not whole yet. And that at that point, when I talked to Prairie Capital, I knew that and I said to them on the phone, I said, if you don't buy me now, I'm not for sale for 6 months, and my number will be bigger, and I'm going to take it to auction. We are queued up, man. Like, so I'm not sure what that money, it's a big check they got. I'm not sure what that money would have been worth if I wouldn't have had the hiccup, right? If it would have gone smooth, I probably would have said that was a waste of a whole bunch of money. But at that point, when I was making that particular decision, 2 days before close, I confidently knew every document that was created to do this deal was now in a data room. I knew that everything that I had lined up, that if they backed away, dude, I'd put all the chips in my whole life, and I decided if they back away from making me whole, if I do these things this year, then I'm gone.
Mhm.
And they closed, and we closed on 12/31. So
Well,
I
and would
can't
you
tell
have
you that I
known and like with that hiccup, and this is where like I struggle communicating sometimes to people that have never been through this, that like the price is one thing, and then there's terms and conditions. And if
Mhm.
you don't know this game, you actually don't know what you missed. So there's like
Right.
this, like, this self-fulfilling prophecy because people are like, well, I wasn't worth it. I got it done. And then, like we hear Pat's story in the boot camp where he says, when he was working for one of his other businesses, that he bought a company, he paid the owner exactly what they wanted, except it was only a third of what he knew what it was worth.
Right. And
So,
so again, huge numbers, right? Every number we're talking about in this pot, they're huge numbers. And so you lose perspective. That's what gets lost. And so you need somebody to hold that perspective and say, your business is worth this, regardless of what these guys tell you on December 28th. And they were very fair, by the way. They like when that all that went down, I knew I sold it to the right people. I knew because yeah, there's hiccups now and there's shit going on, right? With transition. I mean, that's going to happen, but I knew I sold it to the right people because of the way they treated me in that position, right? They treated me with respect. They treated me with an unforeseen, like unknowing, nobody would have known kind of that this would happen. So they did it was the right transition for me. Didn't go to auction, got the money I needed, made my family whole. And now, yeah, I've got the luxury of being working for them for a couple of years, which I'm excited about learning more. I've learned so much in the first, I don't know, what are we, 100 days in or something like that. It's been really, really good. And I've learned the struggles of being a person that gets acquired, not for me, but for my employees and where their fears are and where those fears lie, which if I stay here forever, great. And if I go somewhere else, these are things that I'm going to, know if I go buy if I go buy another company and put in a second, I know how, again, money aside, these guys rip, man. They go fast and they move and they're shaking and they're trying to buy more companies. It's just how this works. But I know in my world, I probably wouldn't go at the pace they did because I'm not comfortable with some of the stuff. But I know if I bought another, what I've learned in this process is you can do it smooth. You can do it with care for the other employees and care for the other company, and they've done a 90% job of that. If that's and to me that's an A,
I
right?
was
It's an
gonna
A
say that's
minus.
yeah,
That's pretty good.
that's pretty
And
good.
it's pretty good. And that was the vetting over 2 years of knowing them, talking to somebody else who sold to them. And it took a lot for me to build that trust to
It's
the
a
exit
it's
point.
a it's a good point, Dave, because there's a lot of money sloshing around, a lot of PE firms, and like what we talk about so much. And I think this is one of my beliefs is that if you go the right approach, like you did, of learning, taking time, understanding the value, understanding what you want, and courting a PE firm, you can absolutely sell to the right private equity firm with the right structure, the right people. It's just people just assume that this check that comes out of nowhere, this offer is going to be, I mean, it's like it's soulmate, man. Like you can't just like,
Yeah.
I mean, you could find your soulmate on the first date. It's just super rare, right? Like how much do you want to put up the chance? So now that I know we got only a couple minutes here, is Dave, if you were to think about, the begin with the end in mind, like what is all, like if
Yeah.
you were to go back to your old self at any point and say, hey, like, here's how, like, this is what the end results could look like. And your story's not even close to over yet, but like, what would you tell yourself? Like, how would you describe what the end means and like how to help you think about this stuff correctly?
Yeah, I think hopefully the next generation of kids has a different perspective than we do. But I don't think it has to be an or, right? I don't think you have to have either you have to have a successful business or a successful family, right? I think there can be some ands in there, like you can have both, and it's really a perspective that you need to create that mindset that's proper for what you need, and feed that properly. And I would say from a business standpoint, I'd be looking at getting consultants in all the time, people with wisdom, people that have seen it before. I can now look back and I can see businesses and say this is happening next. I can actually see it. So that naivety, that ego that I had when I was in my early to mid 20s and then into my early 30s, I look back and say I should have taken I should have spent some of that little bit of money we were making and put it into consultants that had seen it before, because it would have fast forwarded me some way. I'm very proud of what I accomplished, but I think the pride shouldn't get in the way of just being smart and creating a life that's really fantastic for you. I'm definitely not a fruity guy. I still like to suffer and still put myself through some pain, but I really think it just doesn't have to be as hard as I made it. And you're not alone. I was alone, man. It was my dad and I against the world for 25 years. And that's the way you feel. And you don't have to feel that way with, again, organizations that are out there, some traction, or, EOS, as you call it. I mean, all those systems are there for you to just go out and start to try to deploy and pay somebody to come in that's happy to not own part of your company, but to help improve your company. And so I think with the end in mind, I probably, the next business I buy, I'm going to know whether we're going to sell it and keep it. I'm going to know how it's going to transition to whoever my partners are, whether that's an all out sale, or if that's,
whatever
you
option,
and
right?
you being in your mid 30s and me being 50. I might say, hey, listen, here's how you're buying me out, and I want to be bought out by the time I'm 65. And that's okay. That's an okay thing. It's not I have to own it and control the whole thing and make sure that everybody knows I'm super important. It's more like, how do I actually exit this thing to make it continue to go on beyond me.
So awesome. That's so well said, man. So happy for you. Two final questions. What does the word intentional mean for you? You knew that
I
was
knew
coming.
I knew it was coming. Intentional to me now, right, which is different than what I would have thought it would be, is basically looking at where you think you want to be down the road and putting a pin out there, working towards that, but understanding it's not going to be a straight line.
Dude, well said. You must have had some time to think about
I
that.
tried. Hopefully not everybody's confused by,
No,
by
that
that.
was beautiful. All right, man. Well, people that want to reach out to you, find you, what's the best place?
Yep. So with my old business being sold, I've got a new email and a new website, which is the website is davehoeffel.com, and you can email me at dave@davehoeffel.com, and I'm sure you'll put that spelling in there. And I'm just here to help. So if you want to reach out to me and have questions, I love that. That's one of my passions. So I want to make sure that this is smoother for other people than it was for me, just like you helped me. And all the podcasts and everything I learned from all your guests, man, it paid me a lot of money, but also found me Chris Yonker, which has been probably the most valuable part of the whole deal.
Dude, who would have thought you would have been sitting here on this show like this? Thank you so much for
Not
coming on
me.
the show, Dave. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Part two of Dave Hoeffel's interview. My big takeaway is, if you know what you want from your business and why, you know what it's worth, you know what it can be worth, and you build a plan to go get that, and you have the knowledge to understand how to make choices that are in front of you. They're called decision principles, and that is the entire point of the 5 intentional growth principles that are the backbone behind the intentional growth training. Go check it out. It's at arkona.io. It is like taking that red pill in the matrix where you just get it. You don't have to go through all of the problems and challenges and learning in real time. There's a chance to understand how valuations work, how the exits could work, and what's important to you, so that way you have a framework and a lens to make decisions on. So if you get an out of the blue offer, or if you have to make a decision as it relates to the company, or something happens, you know what's important to you and what you should do next, because you've already thought it through and you know how to deviate your plan when something changes that's in front of you. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you next week.